Bring the lights down low, it's time to show. Lights, camera, you know what we mean. Behold the magic of the silver screen. Some movies rock, some movies shock. They're powerful, alright. We cover them all on your favorite part. So many movies we can't choose. Even when you win, you lose. Life moves pretty fast. Some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math. It's the 30-something movie podcast. Be excellent to each other. Peace out and word to your mother. They're from the best decades. Movie magic that never fades. Lightsabers clash, phasers set to stun. Action packed from dusk till dawn. We have deep thoughts and questions three. Come share our love of the movies we see. Life moves pretty fast. Some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math. It's the 30-something movie podcast.
It's the 30-something movie podcast. We are in 1995, gentlemen.
1995.
Do you feel different today? Sure.
I feel different today.
Why not?
I feel different today. It was 10 years ago that we started this whole thing.
Yes. That's the thing, is we keep getting older and these podcasts stay the same.
It's frightening when you think about it.
That's not how that quote goes, but that's okay.
Close
There's a lot
enough.
to be frightened of. There's a lot to be frightened of.
I didn't even do it in the Matthew McConaughey voice either. Wouldn't Matthew McConaughey have been good in this movie? I think about that. Like all the people from Houston with the Texas accents, I feel like this movie could have used. We're talking Apollo 13. Not that this movie didn't already have a bunch of amazing people in it, but I don't know. I feel like anytime you got a movie that takes place in Texas, you could always use even just a little McConaughey.
I agree. I think it would work.
Yeah.
This movie was just packed with talent.
Oh my God. You just look
and I would like to have seen him, in the mission control area. I think that would have really worked.
Yeah.
He could have played one of the reporters, or
he could have been one of the
guys in
astronauts.
suits walking around.
Yeah. Gene, I wonder what the Northrop Grumman guys have to say about this.
Yeah. He could have been there at the end when they got to finally see the side of the ship that got blown out. And he was
All right.
He was like, hey guys, did you see the ship that got the left side completely blown out? So we're talking Apollo 13 on this episode.
We didn't design it to do that, if you did.
There you go. The LEM wasn't designed. It'd be a lot cooler if it was. That would be good stuff. Yeah, we're doing Apollo 13 for this episode. This is our first episode of the year 2025, 1995, for all you folks that are time traveling with us. And as Pat pointed out, this year is the 10th anniversary of our podcast, so we've been doing this little thing for a little while. We've got some fun stuff coming up for this year. Each month, we're going to revisit a movie that we've done over the course of the last 10 years. We are very, very excited for that. Not only excited for that, we are excited for the one we're doing this month in January, because it is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So anytime you get a chance to revisit that one, my soul is prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
No. But yes, this one's Apollo 13. We're starting the year off with the month of January. That is History Month. So the episodes you are going to get with us this month, if you're following along, our Patreon, over on Patreon, we've got an episode that we're calling Pop Culture Rundown. We're basically kind of going through what were some of the big things going on in 1995, which then, as we go through and watch some of the movies, that might help us remind us culturally of kind of what was going on in the world, us, and where we were living in 95, to give some context to the movies that are coming out. Our Patreon short this month, I'm trying to go check out the new Wolfman movie that comes out in the middle of January. It looks a lot of fun. I'm always up for a good horror movie and a good Wolfman movie. So that one's coming out mid-January, so I'm going to do a little Patreon short on that one. And then the rest of our theme this month is history. So you get Apollo 13 this week. Next week is Braveheart. The week after that is Rob Roy. The week after that is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The week after that is Nixon. And then we wrap it all up with Les Mis, the 10th anniversary concert.
I was thinking about that. That's extraordinary.
We're saving some stuff for the rest of the year, so don't worry. Like, we're not just blowing the whole thing right here at the very beginning.
Right.
So, as I said, this one is Apollo 13. If you haven't seen this one or haven't seen it in a while, we do spoil as we talk, so just be warned if we mention a different movie that you don't want to hear anything about, just maybe hit that skip button a couple of times on your podcast app of choice, and then you should jump past whatever it is we were talking about. If you haven't seen this one, first of all, where have you been? What have you been doing with your life? Maybe stop right now and go watch the movie, and then come back and listen to this one, because we'll still be here no matter what. If you haven't gone to our website, 30podcast.com, it's got a space where you can leave a rating for the show. That really helps us out, especially on Apple Podcasts. But any of your other spots, Spotify, any of those others where you might listen to podcasts, that really, really helps us out. You can also leave a voicemail there if you want to respond to something with your voice, because podcasts are audio, oddly enough. So we'd love it if you respond. You respond with text, respond with your voice, whatever you want. But there is a little button on our website where you can leave a voicemail right there without needing to know any kind of phone number or anything like that. There's also a link where you can go donate via Patreon, and you get all kinds of exclusive bonus content for becoming a co-executive producer over there on Patreon with us. And we've got several folks over there that are contributing to the show, and we thank them very, very much for that, because that helps keep everything running. But we've also got some free stuff over there if you're joining us over there on Patreon just as kind of an observer. But hopefully you will at some point then help the show out financially if you are able to. If not, then please just share the show with other people, because we know we've got enough movies in our back catalog at this point. Somebody's going to find something that they will enjoy. All right. It is time to fire up the DeLorean and to head back in time to January. I'm going to share a little something real quick, because the DeLorean reminded me of this. Did I tell you guys what we ended up doing for my birthday back in December?
Not that I recall.
Okay. So we've started doing themed birthday parties, and last year my birthday was everybody had to show up as their favorite character from a Christmas movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I was Clark Griswold from Christmas Vacation. Sharon was the leg lamp. John was Buddy the elf, and then everybody else came dressed up in other costumes. I think we had a Scrooge, maybe a few others here and there. So this year the question came up, what do you want to do? And me being the sci-fi nerd that I am, and there being a series of videos that I had been watching on TikTok that showed what popular dishes were for each decade from like 1900 until today. So it was a time travel themed birthday party. I had a playlist, an hour-and-a-half playlist of songs that had time in the title. Everybody had to come dressed up as someone from their favorite decade or era, and then they had to bring a dish that was popular during that time. So it was a ton of fun. Like, it kind of looked like, once you saw everything put out on the table, it kind of looked like a birthday party that had been designed by a 10-year-old. But, oddly enough, everything kind of came together, because we had, somebody was dressed as a medieval Norwegian or Scandinavian, so they brought Swedish meatballs. One person, my sister came, she didn't necessarily have a costume, so she wore her Jurassic Park shirt and brought dinosaur chicken nuggets.
Outstanding. Everybody needs some dino nuggets.
My sister-in-law was a pirate, so she brought fruit so we wouldn't get scurvy.
Yar.
Sharon was a medieval Scot, so she made a shepherd's pie. My mother-in-law was a cowboy, so she brought beans. John was also a cowboy, so he brought beef jerky. Nora was a grungy 90s kid, so she brought Caesar salad. What did I bring? I was 80s, so I brought sushi and Capri Sun. So it was a weird mixture of stuff, but like everybody had whatever they wanted to have. There was plenty of food. People could pick and choose what they wanted. And like I said,
cool.
It looked like it was put together by a 10-year-old, but in the end, it actually worked out to be just fine.
Nice.
That's awesome.
So it was a lot of fun. Highly recommend it. If your family or friends, if anybody listening, if your family and friends are nerdy enough for you to have themed birthday parties, I highly recommend them, because they're just weird enough that it is fun for everybody. Now, I did offer to take the playlist and turn this into a karaoke party, and I could have brought out the microphone and speaker that I have and piped these songs through the TV, and we could have turned this into a karaoke thing, but I was shot down by the 14-year-old.
Huh.
Shocking. She apparently did not want to do karaoke with her family, so that's okay.
That's just not cool, Dad.
Apparently not. Apparently not.
I have never been cool in your eyes, and I will get less cool as you get older, so suck it up, Buttercup.
Apparently, if you're into karaoke, that's not, you don't have the Riz, as the kids say.
Oh God.
And does anyone on this podcast think they have Riz?
I got the Riz.
Oh, okay.
There it is.
And then I went to the doctor to get some medication for that because
That's better because, maybe you've been sharing a waste tube with someone.
I hear you can get that from a Skibbity toilet.
Oh,
man.
well done. And we have
That's
now
been-
firmly placed this episode at a moment in time.
Yep.
Because the next person that hears this episode 10 years from now will have no idea what we were just talking about.
No idea.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, we barely know what we're talking about.
Clue what I just said.
Yeah.
I want to apologize to anyone that is millennial and older.
I have even had it attempted to be explained to me.
Yeah, right.
I don't have a clue.
At one point, I thought Skibbity Ohio Riz was some kind of voting thing, but apparently not.
Well, it would make sense.
Right, it would.
But no. Exactly.
Yeah.
What did Ohio have to do with anything?
Yeah, it was that rejected Tina Turner song.
Oh, there you go.
What's Ohio got to do with it?
The best for all.
So we've gone back in time, and we are January of 1995. What happened in January of 1995? Well, January 1st, the last Far Side cartoon by Gary Larson was published.
Oh, dear.
That thing lasted 15 years. He started it in 1980, and the last one was January 1st, 1995. My grandpa had every Far Side book that ever got published.
My
was
dad
his
loved that stuff.
absolute favorite cartoon.
That's awesome. I have several of those books, and I've been looking around. Like I've been hoping was, we're far enough. Well, 30 years now from when the last one was published. There's got to be the complete compendium of Far Side things.
Far Side Grail Diary.
Yeah,
there you go.
It's just so good.
Oh. January 4th, Newt Gingrich becomes Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives.
Wow, there's a name I haven't thought of in a long time.
January 12th, the murder trial against O.J. Simpson begins in Los Angeles. And January 17th, a certain George W. was sworn in as the governor of Texas. And it was because he had a winning strategy. Let's see. Births, January 13th. January 13th, 1995, American actress Natalia Dyer, who played Nancy Wheeler in Stranger Things, was born in Nashville, Tennessee.
There you go.
Sports, January 17th, the LA Rams announced that they are moving to St. Louis.
And that was 95?
That was 95 when the LA Rams moved to St. Louis.
Man.
It's because time is a flat circle.
That's true.
I'm not saying the earth is flat.
There will be no flat timers on this podcast.
No.
Okay.
I'm trying to...
Because time, as we know, time is all wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey.
Well, and it's funny because, I, grew up watching a lot of football with the family and friends and all that, but then I kind of fell away from it. Like, I took, a passing interest.
Yeah.
And this must have been, I'm thinking about what time and where I was, growing up and everything.
Pat, can I tell you something?
Tell me something.
You just gave me an outstanding idea for a podcast.
Yeah.
A show where the hosts don't really pay 100% attention to the football season. They're just kind of like, oh, yeah, I know football is played, and some teams played this weekend, and the podcast would be called A Passing Interest.
I think that all sounds good.
I think we can market it.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's quit our jobs.
That sounds good. And we can not be too definite on how long the episode is or keeping within certain times because certain coaches from certain teams have problems watching the clock.
Right. I mean, I think we could come up with something where we, in the last 30 seconds of the episode, we could be like, hey, guys, let's summarize what we've learned today about the NFL, and then maybe just cut the podcast off at the last second before we finish our thought.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be great.
I think that sounds good. I don't know. That's not a problem, in Green Bay. I'm just saying that certain other teams, perhaps.
Those of us that know what you're talking about are perfectly aware, and I think at this point, the entirety of the United States is aware of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't think we're keeping that one on the down low.
No.
Oh, well.
No. So.
No, because so that's wow. So that was when they became, because my neighbor is a big Rams fan and has been a big Rams fan. And when they went back to LA, what was that, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Probably a couple of years ago.
In that ballpark somewhere.
Yeah, but he's like super excited because he says, I still have my original LA Rams gear. So,
Now that's retro and vintage.
Yeah.
Oh, here, Pat, you want to know something?
I want to know something.
Do you want to know that maybe it's been more than a couple years since they went back to LA?
I'm going to guess.
How many would you like
I'm going to say
4 years to build the stadium and a couple years to win a championship.
I'm going to say pre-COVID.
Okay.
I'm going to say 6.
Okay. It was 2016 when they went back to Los Angeles.
Holy buckets. I would not have bet money on that.
Had you done so, you would have lost.
Indeed.
Yeah, 21 years in St. Louis, and then in 2015 was their final year in St. Louis, and then in 2016 they went back to Los Angeles. So, wow, time flies when you have no clue what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Top books in January of 1995 were politically correct bedtime stories by James Finn Garner. And
wow, I remember those.
I never read that one. And the Celestine, is it Celestine or Celestine prophecy?
Celestine, I
Celestine.
believe. So you've mentioned this book a few times now.
Yeah, it was all over
How
94.
How long did it sit at the top of the list? I read it, I have it in a bin somewhere with other books. It's just so crazy to think that it was there that long.
It is. So just to give the people a little heads up, this is going to be, when we do our this month in 95, this is going to be the top book in January, February, March, and April. It was April and May of 94.
Good grief.
A little bit of June of 94. November and December of 94.
Wow.
So this thing was almost sitting on 2 years of being off and on the bestseller list.
Wow.
Yeah. Top movies were Dumb and Dumber and Legends of the Fall, both movies from 1994, not 95 yet. Top songs were On Bended Knee by Boyz II Men and Creep by TLC. Not my preferred version of Creep, but that's okay. I'm a fan of the other Creep that's out there. I'm a weirdo. The heck am I doing here? All right. I think that's all we got for this month in 95. Well, let's head on into our trivia pursuits and tell you a little bit about this one. This one came out on June 30th of 1995, rated PG with a runtime of 2 hours and 20 minutes. Ron Howard was the director, and he has stated, I don't know if this is still true or not, he had stated in the past that this is possibly his favorite movie of his that he has made. So big fan of this one. He also did A Beautiful Mind and The Da Vinci Code. Writers for this one were William Broyles Jr. Producers were Brian Grazer, who did A Beautiful Mind and Arrested Development, Todd Hallowell, who did A Beautiful Mind and Cinderella Man. Composed by James Horner, did Titanic and Avatar. Cinematographer was Dean Cundy, who did Jurassic Park and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Editor was Daniel P. Hanley, who did Rush and Frost Nixon. Production company is Universal and Imagine Entertainment. Budget was $52 million. The money this one made, $355.2 million. So it
quite well.
It banked a few things there. Flickmetrics gives it a 79%, and CinemaScore gives it an A. So this one's getting, free McDonald's with its report card. Tom Hanks played Jim Lovell. He was in Forrest Gump and Saving Private Ryan. Kevin Bacon was Jack Swigert. He was in Footloose and Mystic River. Bill Paxton, who passed in 2017, played Fred Hayes. He was in Twister and Aliens. Gary Sinise played Ken Mattingly. He was in Forrest Gump and The Green Mile. Ed Harris was Gene Kranz. He was in The Truman Show and A Beautiful Mind. Kathleen Quinlan was Marilyn Lovell. She was in The Doors and Event Horizon. Mary Kate Shellart was Barbara Lovell. She was in Free Willy 2, The Adventure Home, and What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Emily Ann Lloyd played Susan Lovell. She was in Apollo 13 as an additional background role, and Knots Landing. Max Elliott Slade played Jay Lovell. He was in Three Ninjas and Three Ninjas Kick Back. Michael Hughes, I don't remember which way, was Jeffrey Lovell, the little boy. He was in Kindergarten Cop and Pet Sematary. David Andrews was Pete Conrad. He was in Fight Club and Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. And Joe Spano was a NASA director. He was in Hill Street Blues and NCIS. One of the interesting things I saw in the trivia was that the actual Marilyn Lovell wife of Jim Lovell, said that Tom Hanks, just the way he portrayed her husband Jim's mannerisms, style of movement, all of that was just spot on. And then in line with some of the pieces of accuracy is Jim Lovell himself saw the movie, and at the time, the CGI that was used, he thought it was so convincing that they had actually somehow dug up additional footage that he had never seen that maybe they had taken during the Apollo 13 mission with their video cameras. Let's see, what else was, there were a couple other things in there. I already mentioned that Ron Howard said that this is one of his favorite movies.
I believe that Jim Lovell has a cameo in this.
He does. He plays a captain on the, what was the ship? Was it the Iwo Jima?
Yep. I think it was Iwo Jima.
Yeah. In fact, they asked him if he would be the admiral of the ship, and he said, nope, when I retired a captain, so I'm going to be a captain.
Mm.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he was
He's
in that.
the guy that Tom Hanks shakes hands with at the end when they do the walk.
Yeah.
Out of the, they get off the helicopter and they're walking across the deck and everybody's cheering for him. He goes up and shakes Jim Lovell's hand.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other kind of interesting things that I had seen about this one was that the actors who were playing in Mission Control, I mean, they all had those headsets on and everything else. They were actually being fed lines directly from technical advisors that were on the set. So the actors didn't need to know their, what do they call it in Star Trek? The technobabble.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
They tech to the tech.
Yep. So they actually had technicians that were in their ear giving them things to say as they were filming the scenes.
Yeah. A little bit of local trivia.
Yeah.
Jim Lovell has a restaurant, Bo, I believe, that's right over in your neck of the woods, right?
I believe I feel like there's a Lovell's restaurant that's still in the area,
Okay.
but is that one owned by his son?
Yep. Jay Lovell. Jay was the
Lovell,
chef at the original, and now it's a little kind of breakfast lunch place.
Yes. Yeah. I always knew it as, like my wife's family, whenever they would talk about, going somewhere for a nicer dinner every once in a while, like you didn't go there very often because it was maybe a little pricier, but they always talked about going there. I never actually ended up getting a chance to go there for anything before it closed, but that was kind of always one of the spots that if you were going to go there for a nicer dinner or a lunch or something, then that might be one of the spots.
We're fortunate enough to go there once as a family. And this is kind of preempting the later conversation, but my dad was a big student and fan, and I followed the space race and astronauts and test pilots and all that kind of stuff, like this whole thing. And so Jim Lovell was a personal hero of his. So when this movie came out and such, and it was right around this time that my grandparents and my family all went to Lovell's. And we met Jim Lovell because we were sitting there. And, he would like walk around.
Yeah.
And
I was going to ask, because my understanding was he was there pretty often.
He was there pretty often. And then all of a sudden we were sitting there enjoying our meal, which was incredible. They have the big painting. I think of some horses kind of galloping over which was the mission patch for Apollo 13. And it was done up as a big painting, the decoration. Anyway, he came walking up and he said, "Good evening, everybody. Do you enjoying your meal?" And it was like, "Yeah." And all of a sudden my dad's eyes got big, because this was, one of his heroes.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is one of his heroes. And we're just like, oh my God, like it was a pretty humbling, pretty amazing moment.
That's cool.
And to carry it further, one of our colleagues used to play there pretty frequently.
Yes. Are you talking about John?
I was talking about John,
Yeah.
and he says that they would always play Rocket Man, and Lovell would give him the, "All right, guys, that's enough," like that kind of thing, which is it's a good bit of fun. But that's just cool on several levels. So, anyways,
very cool. Yeah, that was one of the same reasons I kept trying to, whenever my parents would ask me where I wanted to go for my birthday dinner, I would pick Michael Jordan's in the city, because I'm like, I hear Michael Jordan shows up sometimes, so maybe if we keep going at least once a year, maybe he'll be there one time. I never got a chance to see him, but for similar reasons. But that's really cool. Yeah, I remember hearing that he was there, if not every night, he was there very regularly.
Yeah.
All right, real quick, we're going to give you a quick synopsis of this one, and then we've got the plot broken down into 10 major moments so that we can kind of do a quick flyover, kind of scope things out a little bit before we come in for a landing on our deep thoughts on this one and what opinions and thoughts we might have about it. So, in the face of disaster, Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Jack Swigert must battle the odds when Apollo 13 becomes a ticking time bomb.
On the 13th minute of the 13th hour, the 13th Apollo mission was launched.
Our next broadcast will be from the surface of the moon.
On April 13th, one dead.
Houston, we have a problem.
We got a wicked shimmy up here.
Houston, we are venting something out into space. It's definitely a gas of some sort.
This be the oxygen.
You see what I see?
Flight. Their heart rates are skyrocketing.
We have a 401 alarm.
That can't be real.
Man, it is fighting me. Jack, what's the story here?
I keep losing radio signal.
That can't happen. It's got to be instrumentation.
And we got some serious time pressure here. We're looking at less than 15 minutes of life support left.
It's like they're all over the place. Damn, we're losing it.
We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch.
All right, major moments for this one. We start off during a party at his house. Jim Lovell and guests watch Neil Armstrong take his first steps on the moon. I think it's been a little while since I've seen this movie. It might have been a few years because I don't remember the initial voiceover that took place at the very beginning of the movie.
Oh.
I remember it at the end of the movie. I did not remember it at the beginning of the movie, and I didn't get a chance to check. I wanted to go and check and see who the narrator was, who was voicing, doing the voiceover. It didn't sound like Tom Hanks to me, that it might have been somebody different. But I'll tell you what it gave me vibes of. Like, as I'm listening to this whole thing, and it's like, and then the space program was this, and going through the whole voiceover, I kind of wanted it to end with, and Tom Mix wept.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it sounded
That's what it did sound like.
It sounded a little Tombstone-y to me when they were doing that kind of initial. And these boys with the red sash were called the astronauts. All right. So anyway, they're at a party. They watch on TV the moon landing from Apollo 11. He's kind of reflecting on his experience orbiting the moon during Apollo 8 and kind of talking about his dreams of walking on the surface of the moon, showing just how invested he is in this program and how he has this deep desire to be someone who can set foot on and walk on the moon, and how the very small number of people who have actually done that, just what that must feel like to be so close and then just not have a chance to do it. And through the events of this movie as well, that he was so close and he should have had the opportunity to be able to do that, but because of the accident, that he was not able to fulfill that dream. This movie is full of great lines and great quotes. The one line I like from the beginning here is that he's talking to his wife, Marilyn, and he says, "From now on, we live in a world where a man has walked on the moon."
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of thinking about the historical significance of all that. Jim Lovell learns that his crew will fly Apollo 13 earlier than planned, taking over when they were going to be Apollo 14, but due to a bit of a calamity, they are going to take over as Apollo 13. During the training, Ken Mattingly is replaced by backup astronaut Jack Swikert, supposedly due to exposure to the measles. This is causing some tension because it is late in the game and you don't really change your crew when you've been training together for that much time, and you know, I think he makes the comment like, we know how each other thinks, we know how each other moves. You don't break that up at the last minute. But he has to ultimately make the decision as to whether they are going to get bumped to Apollo 14 or even something later, or if they're going to go with Jack Swikert as their replacement. Apollo 13 successfully lifts off despite some second stage engine failure during the Saturn V's ascent. The crew completes some critical maneuvers to dock the command module Odyssey with the lunar module Aquarius, and that's going to then take them on the rest of their trip to the moon. We kind of skip over, I skipped over a bunch of stuff leading up to their training, but we've gotten to the launch, and even Ron Howard himself has commented on this launch scene and how he feels
it's
like
amazing.
It's one of the most, he said, I think it's one of the most cinematic things he's ever done. And it is, even looking at it today, because sometimes you look back at these movies that are 30 years old and you're like, the effects, it's that, I mean, you can see that it was made in 1995. I watched that launch scene and I can't think of a way you could do it better in 2025.
And for me, I think it is so impactful because not only everything that you're talking about, but it puts you there and you start to think, my God, what would it feel like to be sitting on top of a rocket like that?
Yeah.
And the whole buildup where they're walking up and they're getting ready and they're getting plugged in. And, you know, there's that kind of like locker room kind of vibe to it, you know, the camaraderie piece of it. but then they cut back and forth to their families. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's almost like the way that Jaws holds up, where so much of that relies on the soundtrack and the editing. Yes, the special effects and everything. I mean, as opposed to Jaws, where the mechanical shark didn't work, it all works. The mechanical shark, figuratively speaking, in this movie definitely works.
Yeah.
But you get all the added benefit of that cutting to the family and the emotion they're feeling. And then the emotion of these guys and, what it must, what they're going through. But then you get that soundtrack that just takes everything to that next level and just puts you right there. I mean, it is just an amazing sequence. It's just amazing.
Yeah. There's a funny scene when he says like something like, "Gentlemen, get ready for a little jolt."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, there's a couple of jolts there. I was kind of curious about this. I was able to find on a space exploration stack exchange, some folks who seemed like they knew what they were talking about kind of shared what's going on here. They said that once you have that main engine cut off, for the most part, the film gets this mostly correct. It's not just some Hollywood stuff they did for tension. But apparently what ends up happening is immediately after you do the main engine cutoff piece, the structure, the actual physical rocket itself is compressed under, what did they say, like 7 million pounds force of thrust. And then the rocket itself actually gets shorter, like it's compressed like a spring. And then when the engines get shut down, everything kind of stretches back to its full length. And then that could be what we're seeing when they were kind of jerked forward and then jerked back. And they said some of that has to do with when you have that secondary rocket firing to get some more acceleration. But some of it has to do with the pressure that's being placed on the rocket itself, and that it almost compresses a little bit like a spring or a slinky.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So, all right, let's see, where are we at here? We got to the launch, and then 3 days into the mission, it is time to stir the oxygen tanks, and Swikert is the one to do this, and so he stirs the oxygen tanks, which triggers an explosion in one tank and a leak in another. We learn later on that there was a faulty piece that was inside one of these tanks, and he mentions that, this would have been built or manufactured, 2 years before they, became the crew of the Apollo 13. So it's really nothing that was under their control. And we know just from the history of the space program that there have been different accidents or different things that have happened because of such minor flaws in the manufacturing process of these things. Oftentimes it's kind of hard to trace back, where a particular thing was made and when it was made and how long has it been sitting there. And so it sounds like this is just one of those other things that as a program you kind of learn along the way. I don't think that they would have necessarily even thought to do certain checks beyond all that. I mean, they have so many checks in place. I've never been an astronaut. I've never been a part of NASA or anything like that, but just in the very little amount of reading I've done or having visited Cape Canaveral and Houston and being able to see all the different NASA facilities and reading up, when you're there at the museums, kind of reading up on the stuff, all the things that they do. And then there may be this one little piece that you miss, and that's the piece that kind of blows the whole thing away. And in this case, absolutely blew a bunch of it away and caused this disaster. So it's crazy to think of everything that goes into hopping on one of these rockets, blasting off into space, and all the millions of things that can go wrong, and that so many times it's gone right. And we've had successful missions and people have gotten back safely. And I mean, there are those handful of times where they haven't, but for all the different things that go into even just getting up into space itself, much less getting to the moon, maybe landing on the moon, it's just, it's amazing.
Well, and it's funny because it's in Tom Hanks or Jim Lovell's monologue, this will be my final mission. I'm going to be walking on a place with a temperature difference between light and dark. And he talks about those, just the extremes, right?
Yeah.
And, you're talking about the force of a rocket launching you into space, and what what you were describing, how the thing expands and contracts and so forth. And you think about that, just it's such extreme environments. And then, you bring up another point where just so many little parts go into this that, you got to get all the big things right, like the math, the calculus of, orbits and all this kind of thing. And then you realize that it could be a design flaw, right? It could be a mechanical failure. And I don't know the details of the Apollo mission where there was the fire on the launch pad where the door failed. Again, I don't know, but like they bring that up and his son asks him, is the door fixed? And he, they've they found an improvement, and that's part of it. Like, you're like anything, you're engineering something, it's going to fail. You find a solution, so on. Yeah. I've heard this too, is that you spend millions and billions of dollars and then it's the 10-cent part fails. Right.
Yeah.
And so,
piece of metal.
Yeah, when you think on that level, that's the attention to detail that is required to do that. It's inherently an extremely dangerous thing, right? I mean, it's pretty awe-inspiring.
Yeah, it was Apollo 1. That was the one where it caught fire, and I was reading up on that a little bit earlier, and apparently it was kind of a combination of a bunch of different things that they just didn't even think about. What did I read? It was going to be an unfueled test. So they kind of figured, well, there's no fuel involved, so what's going to explode if something bad happens here? Apparently, it was a combination of what they determined was that the ignition was electrical, that the source of the fire was electrical, and it spread very quickly because inside the cabin there was highly combustible nylon material and a high-pressure, pure oxygen cabin atmosphere.
It was that cabin atmosphere that did them in.
A bunch of different emergency tests. Like, they hadn't run a bunch of drills. They might have run some drills, but it sounds like that was another thing that was kind of blamed on it, was they weren't prepared for different eventualities that might occur. And so it was like kind of a combination of things. And you think that, well, that's Apollo 1, and the progress they made and kind of the learning from, obviously, big and fatal mistakes like that got them all the way to Apollo 11, where you're finally landing on the moon and you've gotten there. And then to this one, Apollo 13, the stuff they were able to do to save this mission, I'm sure owes a lot to a lot of the mistakes that they made in the earlier missions. Because you're working the problem. As was it Krantz said that, let's work the problem, people. Like, we got a problem, we just got to fix it. Failure's not an option here. And that kind of, when this disaster happens and they're losing power, they're losing oxygen, they have to get into the lunar module as a lifeboat, and mission control is trying to figure out, well, we got to figure out some kind of way to build a filter, but we can't use the command module stuff with the LEM stuff because one's a square and one's a circle.
We got to get this to fit in the whole design for this. Nothing but that. One of my favorite lines in the whole movie.
To keep it family friendly, I'm going to say that whole thing reminds me of the movie The Martian, where he's got to figure out how he's going to grow potatoes on Mars. So I feel like if you're a kid who loves science, if you're in a STEM class and that's your bag, is that you love science and you love engineering and solving problems, I feel like The Martian and Apollo 13 may be the movies for you. Like, to take impossible problems and have, like, work through, all right, here's the materials I've got available to me. Here's how I'm going to survive this. I got to work the problem, figure this out, get creative, think outside the box. Like, no solution is a bad solution if we can get it to work.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And that's one of the things that just comes forward in this movie, I think, in the exploration of space. And like I said, the test pilots were working the problem. Right? Yeah. Okay, what are we going to do? Turn it around, bring it back. Well, we can't do that. Well, why not? Well, and then always, I want to read more about him. I saw a special on the space program that interviewed Gene Kranz. He was a particularly impressive individual. Like, I kind of expected the historical perspective and all that, but just talking about the big picture and moving humanity forward and how to be a leader and keep people motivated. And I just found him so impressive. And that portrayal, the character that Ed Harris portrays in this is just so impressive. Just that calm, like, okay, people, let's, like, hang on. Here's why we're not going to do that. Right. We don't have a guarantee. So that's out. Now, that is just so impressive to me.
Yeah. Well, and somebody who in that role has to basically herd cats.
Yes.
Because he's, like, his job and what he's able to do so well is he has got, I mean, at different times, I think he's got 2 to 3 different teams of people saying, okay, well, here's your biggest problem. We've only got 45 hours, until they run out of power. Well, that's not even your biggest problem. The CO2 is your biggest problem. No, guys, over here. Your biggest problem is this, and this. It's X, Y, Z. And then to be able to take those different teams, I mean, what that must have been like in the actual historical moment, but I'm sure he had competing teams saying, okay, well, no. Here's the thing you've got to really be concerned about. Right. And he's got to be able to balance and figure out, okay, well, which one do we tackle first? Because we can't necessarily do all these at once.
Right. And then when the one guy came along and said, we don't have 45 minutes or 45 hours. We got to do this right now.
You got 16.
Yeah. We got to power this whole thing down and figuring it out.
I interrupted you, so that's fine.
I think it's interesting, and I can't speak from a societal perspective, but I mean, we went to school before the STEM thing was a big thing, right? I mean, it was almost like, and maybe this was always the way it was, but, you know, we always liked to categorize, oh, well, the nerds and the this and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But what you see in this movie is people that are just highly intelligent, can work together, very well educated, and they can solve problems and fix things and all that. And I think that was something that we lost in this country for a time, to where I'm not going to sit here and blame schools and teachers and all that kind of stuff, but just as a society, what people do we put up on pedestals and choose to be impressed with? And I think we fell away from that. You know, and that was some of the thing in watching this movie that, you know, when he says, like, we're living in a world where someone's walked on a moon, and we did that in the space shuttle, but then we kind of fell away from that, where until SpaceX came along, we had to go to other countries to get our rockets up into space. Right. And I think it's impressive now that we're coming back to that, and you see STEM classes and the importance of STEM education and the importance of engineering and understanding engineering. I think that's good. And I'd like to think that as a society, we're going to be more accepting and honoring those people that do this kind of work. But it was something that you said where, okay, well, what problem do we have to work? There's a line when Swaggart comes in and says, our angle's too shallow, we're going to skip off the surface, or we're coming in too fast. I don't think it was the angle. I think it was the speed. And Tom Hanks says, you know, we got 1,000 things to do. That's step 900. We're on step 20 or something like that. Yeah. We just can't deal with it yet.
Yeah.
It's like everybody wants the answer right now. Like, what's the ultimate, what's going to be the solution that's going to make it work? And if we find something that, okay, well, this is a good step, we all want it to be the final thing. Right? Whatever side of the debate you're on, if you're pro, you're like, this is it, we found it. And if you're anti, you're going to point out all the flaws and say, well, this is why it doesn't work. But what we have to embrace is the idea that, okay, well, this is a step, but the engineering and refining process keeps going. That's going to present new problems. And guess what? We're going to engineer new solutions. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I see that on display in this movie and kind of what we saw in the space race, right, for lack of a better term, early space exploration, to where, okay, Apollo 1 gets us to Apollo 2, gets us to Apollo 3. And I think we're almost, as a society, missing that now. We want the quick hack, the immediate fix, the app that solves all the problems. And then if we are presented with something that, like, okay, you know, like I said, well, electric vehicles aren't going to work because blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, we don't have everything worked out right now, but let's keep engineering the solution. And then the next version, right, will have that improved. The next version will, and I hope my rambling is making sense, but what I like in this movie is it shows us a group of individuals, unfortunately, in our history, I'd love to say currently, but, you know, it was in our history that we're able to do an amazing thing because of that. We've got a problem. Okay. We got a square peg that needs to go in a round hole. Yeah. The next version, we're going to fix it. We're going to get there right now. And we don't have the option of just saying, you know, failure is not an option.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we have to fix this. It's not going to be perfect, but we're going to figure out how to make this work.
Right.
And we're going to have to work through it. I just find that so impressive. And I just hope that we can, as a society, get back. It just seems like now we all want the quick fix that works right away. It's not 100% right away, and we have to engineer a solution. If we have to figure out, it's just throw our hands up and, well, it just wouldn't work. It's a stupid idea, and I'm going to go play my little video game and unplug or plug in, and just, as opposed to, like, work the problem.
Yeah.
I don't want to end on a negative note. I'll end on a positive. I like that this movie portrays and shows a time period in history, and it honors people that will sit down and say, hey, we can't fail. We have to make this work. We have to bring these people home.
Not an option.
So I don't know. Did that make sense?
So that, and you mentioned they have to do a little bit of a manual trajectory correction because their navigation systems are offline.
Am I jumping ahead in where you were headed?
No, that's pretty much where we're at.
Oh, yeah. Then they're shallow because they're underweight.
Yeah.
Because they didn't bring back how many pounds of moon rocks.
The moon rocks, yeah.
It just, at some point, Lovell makes a comment early. Well, there's our glitch for the mission.
Yeah. Don't say that.
If only you knew.
Right.
Because it just, like, at some point, you're like, oh my God, like, how many times can they be wrong?
That's what in English classes we call the dramatic irony, because you haven't even said, Houston, we have a problem yet.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't,
It's just going back to that attention to detail. Like, these calculations are set. There's no margin for error, right? We are expecting to have this many pounds of moon rocks.
Right.
And all of the other math is based on that. Well, it's like when Hayes does the math on the CO2, everything is so tightly planned.
Yeah.
Right.
That it's crazy.
Yeah.
And like the one guy represented said, well, I can't vouch for that. Guess what? This is what it's like another version of that. We have to put the round peg in the square hole.
Yeah. It's like when they tell them, so we need you to tear up the flight plan. And they're like, oh, gladly. We don't need this thing anymore.
Can we please?
So then they have to go through, they have some critical engine burns they have to do to make sure that they're going in at the correct angle. Mattingly, working with mission control, has to come up with a power-up sequence to restart the command module without exceeding the amperage that they need to have. They are able to execute this whole thing. They jettison the lunar and service modules. They finally get to see the damage that was done to the side of the spacecraft. Then there's a little bit of worry about the heat shield. And they're like, well, do we even tell them about the heat shield? Like, can they do anything about it? No. All right, well, then we don't tell them. You wonder, in the drama of the movie of this, there are so many problems with this mission, one right after another. There's a domino effect of them discovering other problems. And you wonder, too, in the movie they do this a couple of times, but you wonder also in real life, how many other problems were probably happening, and they're like, do we even tell them about that? No. I mean, what are they going to do about it? We'll help them fix the problems we can, and then we don't need to tell them, like, why should we panic them with something that is completely out of their control?
Yeah.
So we get that tense moment where, as they are re-entering Earth's atmosphere, they have a blackout period of, 3 minutes, 4 minutes? I think it was 3 minutes.
Was 4 or something like that.
Yeah, and so it goes on. So you've got that kind of tense moment where I think it's Gary Sinise's character keeps repeating, Odyssey, this is Houston, do you copy? And you hear the little bit of crackling of the radio, and that goes on for longer than you would think it goes on for. Like, in the movie time itself, like, you're just sitting there thinking, well, shouldn't they have answered by now? Shouldn't they have answered? And they cut back and forth to scenes of the family. And the wife, is just getting increasingly distraught. The kids are starting to cry because they realize the length of this should have been 3 minutes. If dad's not responding to this after 3 minutes, then that means he's gone. So the longer that goes, when you get to 4 minutes, they're like, well, nobody's ever gone past 3 minutes. So the longer you get past that, the reality is starting to kind of sink in for everybody. And just it builds up the tension that you're waiting such a long time. And then you finally get that response that they're there and they're fine. Everybody in the whole movie just erupts in cheers and applause. And so they emerge from that blackout. They are intact. They splash down safely in the Pacific, and just this massive celebration. And you get this great kind of reflection voiceover at the end. And, this was 1995, when I don't feel like we were having a ton of missions to space in the mid 90s, late 90s, because we were nearing 2000. And he has that line, I think it was at the end, something like, I look up at the moon and I wonder, when will we be going back and who will that be? And then it kind of wraps up the thoughts of the movie at that point. So not just a movie about where we've been and what we did and what we were able to accomplish, but things have kind of hit a bit of a lull when this movie comes out in terms of space exploration and stuff like that. So the movie could be seen as a little bit of a PSA as to, hey guys, we're not done. It's like we got there, and what was the thing the one guy said earlier in the movie is like, well, we've been to the moon and we beat the Russians, so why do we go back?
Yeah, it's I don't know if they tell us if he's a senator or a congressman, but he says constituents, so
yeah,
one of the above.
Right. Yeah. So, all right, that is the major moments.
And now, Deep Thoughts.
I have an opinion on this matter.
I like it a lot.
Wow. It's very deep. Thank you.
I'm not going to spend too much time in our deep thoughts because I feel like we've already been talking about the movie kind of through as we were going through the different moments in the movie, kind of summarizing the whole thing. But let me just ask you this. This is my only deep thoughts question, and then we'll pop into the three questions. What do you love best about this movie? Like when you think of Apollo 13, if you had to narrow it down to one thing, like this is the biggest thing that I just really enjoy, and I'm making the assumption we really enjoy it because I think we do. What is the one thing that you look at if somebody hands you a copy of Apollo 13 and says, I want you to watch this, what's the first thing that pops into your mind that's going to get you excited about
it? I think I said it already. It's that scene where they're trying, it's not one scene, but it's all the sequences involved in that CO2 scrubber thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's the scene where they're engineering the fix.
Yep.
It's the scene where they're building it up on the capsule, and then he goes, I broke the bag. Can we tape it?
Can we tape it?
But they should have one more bag. Like, it's stuff like that where they're, ingenuity is an amazing thing. And to see that, the way they depict it, and that's probably what I think about the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really well said. I'm trying to find what is the one thing? And
that is the other thing about a movie like this, and any really good movie, is there is no one thing.
Right.
Yeah. And I kind of went off, let's engineer a solution. Let's get to the next step, then we'll engineer the next solution. And I talked about the launch sequence. Not only does this movie and the filming and the special effects hold up, but I think just the human element, like the acting performances to bring you into the excitement, adventure, fear, terror, sadness, I think are epic. And I think the soundtrack is amazing. Yeah. So to hone in on one thing, that launch sequence is pretty special.
Does such a great job of depicting the violence needed to propel something that heavy that fast.
Yeah.
Like when I watched it with my wife, and we were just, there's something about this viewing struck with the violence of that takeoff, of the explosion needed to get you to escape velocity.
Because all the stuff on the tower being just shoved out of the way as it is blasting off.
And the paint chips falling. And even before that, actually, what started us on it was we both went to comment at the same time about how they're strapping them in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're stepping on their shoulders and they're pulling those things really tight.
Yeah.
But that's all about those G-forces on takeoff are so strong that they want to make sure you're not going to go nowhere.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You didn't. And then you get ready for the jolt, and after them getting bolted in, like that, suddenly they're
right.
Yeah. Well, I will say if my one thing would be, I'm going to sum it up and just say inspiration. That I think a combination of, and I'm going to actually name two people. I'm going to say that Tom Hanks in particular, I think, just has a knack for being these characters that are just inspiring characters. I think there's something inspirational about Forrest Gump. There's something inspirational about Jim Lovell in Apollo 13. There's something inspirational about him in Castaway. Like all these different movies, there's something inspirational about it, but I kind of wanted to key in on a couple of things in particular that I think about two people that have worked together on several movies, and I feel like the movies that I've seen where these two gentlemen work together have some of the most inspiring moments. And when I say inspiring moments, I mean I'm watching a movie and a combination of what I'm seeing on the screen, maybe what I'm hearing what the characters say, and the music just gives you a little lump in the throat. It gives you like your chest just kind of like swells with pride, or it's like, this is humanity. Like humanity has done this great thing, or it's a moment where you're just like, yeah, I'll pick up a sword and go fight with that army too. And that kind of stuff. And I think Ron Howard and James Horner do an amazing job of that. I mean, I'm thinking of the other collaboration that they had that I absolutely love, and it's the same thing. The moments where the music swells and what I'm seeing on the screen, I'm thinking of Willow. Like as a kid and as an adult, when I watched the movie Willow, like when that music starts swelling and Val Kilmer is swinging his sword around, and like the combination of what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is just, it's inspirational. And I think Ron Howard does that so well. I think he's been criticized sometimes before about some of his movies being a little too, I don't know, what's the word I want to use? Sometimes he gets criticized for being a director that doesn't take risks. And that might be true to a certain degree. But at the same time, like when I watch his movies, and especially the movies where he has paired himself up with James Horner as the composer, just that combination of the visuals and the soundtrack is just like, I can come back and rewatch that anytime you want.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things about this movie is that you go through all the tension of the movie, you go through all the danger and all the stuff that's going wrong. But I think in the end, you just like, you want to cheer along with the people, even though you might be sitting there in your living room, like when the people cheer, because, and you may have seen this movie, 10 times, but when they come back over the radio and everybody starts cheering, you almost want to get up and cheer with the rest of the people that are in the movie.
Yeah.
So that's my one thing about this movie.
Well, and I think it's like what you're saying, and I know we've had that discussion about Ron Howard in his movies, but it's like, I would say to those folks, well, what risks should be taken? He's just making, and when I say just, I'm saying it more as humorous, he's just making really good movies. Pardon the pun. It's not rock, just keep it simple and tell great stories, We
could have had a fully CGI Ken Mattingly.
Here's the thing is like, what would Scotty say? The more they overthink the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain.
Mm-hmm.
Don't overthink it. Just tell great stories. Give people that pride. Let people take a lesson away. Bring these characters to life in a believable and relatable way. The guy makes great movies.
Maybe some people want their astronauts to be dark and gritty.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Houston, we have a problem. That's a mashup nobody saw coming. All right.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else we want to say about Apollo 13 before we jump into our 3 questions? All right. I'm going to flip the switches. Hopefully when I stir the 3 questions, nothing happens.
He asks each traveler 5 questions. 3 questions. 3 questions.
It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
All right, question number 1. They have the scene where they're taking the video and they're broadcasting the video back to the folks at home, and Fredo decides to change the song at the last minute, so where it's not. What were they going to do? They were was it the theme from 2001? Is what they were planning to do? Yeah. Little song change. So if you were going to go to space, what song would you bring for the backdrop of your video to transmit back home?
Space Oddity comes to mind.
That's a great one.
Although I have to say they picked a really good one for this.
They did.
Spirit in the Sky is pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
But Space Oddity was the first one that came to.
I went with Starman by David Bowie.
Yeah.
There you go.
I have to go Bowie.
Is that the one?
Life on Mars.
Yep.
I don't know about like message in the lyrics, but I just think any of Peter Quill's Awesome Mix tunes.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why those just, I was listening through, and what's the one? I can't think of the title. So go to the next guy and I'll try and look it up and come back. But I seem to, and maybe it's just because, that movie takes place in outer space.
We just start listing the songs. Mr. Blue Sky.
Well, Rubber Band. Yeah, I think it was Mr. Blue Sky.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, was that the one that starts out with the guitar, like the awesome guitar riff?
Mr. Blue Sky was the ELO, the Electric Light Orchestra song. That was at the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I think.
Okay, hang on.
When Toddler Groot is dancing around while they're fighting that big tentacled monster.
Yeah, I think, hang on, I'm going to play something. No, it wasn't that. Was it? Let me see if I
think when you're playing something, you might be the only person hearing it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to go through to find. As soon as we stop the episode, I'm going to listen through and I'll text you, and then you can edit it in all your spare time. Here's the song Pat couldn't think of.
Yeah, that's fine. My name is Pat, and my favorite song is. Okay, there we go. Now we got to put a spot to put it in.
Yeah, there it is.
All right. Question number 2. Here's our food question for the episode. I've been occasionally, as we've been leading up to this one for the last few weeks or so, I've been jokingly referring to this movie as Apoyo 13, pronouncing it like pollo in Spanish. What is or was, if you currently no longer have meat anymore, what is or was your favorite way to prepare chicken?
I like this dish that we make. It's called salsa chicken. You put it in a baking dish, chicken breasts.
Okay.
I like to put some salsa in first. You put the chicken on top.
Yeah.
Then you bathe the chicken in salsa, so it's just cooking in it. Keeps it really moist. Then you put some cheese on top of that, preferably some taco cheese, so it's got a little seasoning to it.
Yeah.
You bake the crap out of it.
Okay.
It is so good.
Okay. I like what I'm hearing here. I love the Indian foods. I'm going to say a chicken tikka masala or a butter.
Knew you were going to go with a tikka masala.
I think I got to go that route.
Well, as the individual that, as you alluded to, doesn't eat chicken anymore, I think what I really liked is whenever it was like, it was barbecue. Yes. Any of the barbecue sauce or barbecue flavoring and all that kind of stuff. Do I have this right? Like, I think of barbecue sauce as like a thick barbecue sauce, like almost like a ketchup, right? Uh-huh. But then isn't there a certain kind of barbecue that you get like down south where it's almost more of a vinegary barbecue sauce?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay. I have that right. That's not just a matter of north-south, or is it north-south?
No, it's kind of state-based. I want to say Carolina barbecue sauce tends to be vinegary, or you might hear something called a Piedmont that would lean a little towards vinegary.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, in any event, I'm kind of a fan of the sauces, dips, rubs, marinades, all that kind of stuff. And so I'd say barbecue. That was always but I like what you guys are talking about with the salsa and talking about with the Indian food and all that kind of stuff.
I have a couple of people at work that may be taking me out to lunch. Well, I'm giving away when this is being recorded now. It's a couple of weeks after the fact, but maybe taking me out to lunch as a belated birthday lunch. Mm-hmm. And I think we might end up going over to that Singh's Kitchen that you and I went to, Pat.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm going to get my Indian fix.
Is the first time for these individuals?
For these individuals, yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. All right, question number 3. If we had the technology to go safely and quickly to anywhere in the solar system, what planet/moon/body, and I don't mean human, would you want to walk on or fly over? Pat, you can give your initial answer if you'd like to.
No, that's okay.
Go ahead.
I'll play by the rules.
Pat, come on.
We're going.
What's your answer, Pat?
Mars.
That's not your answer, Pat.
Uranus.
Well,
I'll say Mars.
Okay.
In sci-fi and all that, Mars, Red Planet, Martians, all that kind of stuff, even down to the Expanse, right? Like the groups to colonize Mars, and there's the discussion of colonizing Mars eventually at some point. And
Total Recall.
Yeah, I guess, what was that?
Total Recall.
Total Recall, yeah. So I guess if I had to pick one place, that would be it.
Okay. All right. I'll let everybody else guess what he was going to say, and I'll just do this.
Dreamweaver. I believe you can get me through the night.
I will go on the record as saying your initial question is, if you could go anywhere in the solar system, which planet, moon/body would you like to visit? So I just wanted to clarify. Are we doing a strict interpretation of the word body?
You may interpret it however you want.
Yeah.
This is, if nothing, if not an ecumenical podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What is your answer?
This is so hard, but I think I'm going to say Europa.
Oh, we're going to have a daily double then.
is showing what it could be if there's really water under all that ice like we think there is. And I gotta know.
I got to know.
I do. Yeah, I think it would have to be Europa. Like, I want to say Saturn, but because I want to see the rings up close and personal, but I think Europa is too hard to pass up.
I've been to Saturn. You've been to Saturn. Sandworms, right? You hate them.
Sandworms.
Yeah. That is also, Europa was also mine because, for a couple of different reasons, it is, I believe, the 6th closest of the 95-ish moons of Jupiter. And being that close to Jupiter, I just want to see what it would look like to just turn around and look up in the sky. Because Jupiter's massive anyway.
Jupiter.
Right. Like, what does that even look like?
The horizon, right?
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
It's huge.
Absolutely. My other reason is because I kind of want to, I don't think I was ever one of those kids that, like, when your parents said, don't stick your finger in the socket because you'll get shocked, that I was like, oh, let me try. But after watching the movie 2010, the year we made contact,
yep,
and being left with the message, all these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landings there. I got to know.
I got to know.
I mean, I know they said not to, but that's kind of dumb.
On me.
Yeah. I want to see what's there. And just everything I've read and like artists' interpretations of what it could possibly look like there. Like, it just seems like it'd be kind of a cool place to check out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that whole thing of being able to like turn around and just, I know how cool it looks to be on Earth and to look up at the sky and see the moon, especially on nights when the moon seems big. I'm like, but I feel like being on Europa and looking at Jupiter, that may be the only thing you're going to see in the entire sky.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think would be awesome. All right, gentlemen, I think we've landed this podcast safely. I don't think we skipped off the atmosphere and just bounced our way into deep space. So I think we did our due diligence here. And a great movie. If for some reason you have not seen this movie and you listened to us first, definitely go watch it. It is well worth a watch. Such a fun movie and such a great team of filmmakers with Ron Howard, James Horner, all the actors that are in this, Tom Hanks and everybody else that are in this. It's a great movie to kick off the 1995 year because it is a home run of a movie. Like, I can't think of too many movies that hit every possible point you could hit and do it so well.
Yep.
No. All right. Well, once again, we are in History Month. So if you're over with us on Patreon, we've got the Pop Culture Rundown 1995, Patreon short for Wolfman, the 2025 movie. This week was Apollo 13 coming up. Next week, we've got Braveheart, then Rob Roy, then Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade as our 10th anniversary rewatch, Nixon, and then the Les Miserables 10th anniversary concert. Oh, thank you, Bo, and thank you, Pat, for being here with me.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
And everybody, be excellent to each other. Go watch some good movies. And it's time to blast off.
Bring the lights down low, it's time to show. Lights, camera, you know what we mean. Behold the magic of the silver screen. Some movies rock.